Hey everybody, it's the Trout, and welcome to another episode of the Trout Show. Thank you so much for stopping by. You know, I'm a sucker for three-part harmony and people that sing backup for bands out there in the music world. I had the opportunity one time in one of my bands to actually have two great backup singers. But today we actually talked to one of the great backup singers for one of the most famous artists that are out there right now. His name is Joe Bonamassa. Joe sells out everywhere he goes, and he has three wonderful ladies singing backup for him, and one of them I had the opportunity to interview. Her name is Jade MacRae. Now, Jade is out of Australia. She's had her own career and was famous down in Australia, but now she's been with Joe for years. And she talks about how she became an artist, a famous artist, in fact, in Australia, and all about being a backup singer, and also about her new album that she just released, because she does have her own stuff too. So get yourself an adult beverage, sit back and enjoy this episode with Jade MacRae, backup singer extraordinary. That's next on The Trout Show. You know, there are times in our life when we come across financial problems that we just don't know what to do. I had a friend recently have a relative of his pass away and left him a large sum of money. He said, what do I do with this? I don't know how to handle it. Well, I've got just the kind of person that you need to talk to if you're in this situation yourself, and that's David Smith with Edward Jones. David can help you look at your situation and provide you expertise that he's done for years. So if you're located in the continental United States, reach out to David Smith with Edward Jones at 469-372-1587. Don't tackle these situations by yourself. Get a hold of someone that can provide you the expertise that will help you make decisions that are important to your financial situation. So don't forget, call David Smith, 469-372-1587 for all the financial assistance that you may come across. David Smith with Edward Jones. This morning, I'm listening to some of your music, okay? And then I went to the dictionary, and I looked up the word soul, okay. And then I saw your picture right next to it. I mean, I'm telling you, it was dripping so much with the soul that you sing with, young lady. It's just incredible. It wasn't, I mean that with all sincerity, because, you know, when you're performing in the background, so to speak, with two other fine singers, not everybody knows who you are.
Oh, you know, most people don't know who you are.
You know, and then I started looking, you know, and then all of a sudden, your friend, that's how I found you, was your boss, put a picture of you with the other two ladies, what was it, about 3 or 4 weeks ago or something like that, and said something about you had a new album out, and I thought, well, what the heck, let's see what she could do, and I figured it couldn't be too bad if you're playing with Joe Bonamassa. So you've got, I'm going to start at the beginning, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, you're from Australia originally, is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. I spent most of my life thus far in Australia. I was actually born in the UK. Okay. Both my parents are also session musicians, and they spent about 25 years in London. And I was born there sort of towards the tail end of their period of life there. And then we moved to Australia. I did all my schooling in Australia, started my career in Australia. And I've been living here in the US for about 4 years now, basically since COVID kicked off. Yeah. But I've been working with Joe for almost 10 years now. So yeah, the first tour I did with him was in 2015. So we've been working together a long, long time.
And it's funny when you talk, I can hear the British and the Australian accent.
Yeah.
I know people in both of those countries, so it's like,
sure.
You know, I talk to people all over the world, but I mean, I can hear both. When I read about your parents, because you obviously come from a musical family, which not always happens. What they were classic musicians. What kind of musicians are they?
You really not too dissimilar from what I do, but I guess if you had to pigeonhole my dad, you would put him more in a jazz category.
Okay.
And my mom has, become a jazz singer, but, she very much was doing exactly what I do now. She used to sing with any number of people. Van Morrison, she was with for a long time.
Oh,
Rod
wow.
Stewart, Cliff Richard. She really was doing the rounds. Olivia Newton-John, Dusty Springfield, all of those sort of classic 70s artists out of the
Right.
UK.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're very similar to what I do. Really versatile and really really talented. Both my parents. I learned most of what I know. I learned from them.
So when you were growing up, did you go see your mom and dad? I mean, especially your mom was playing with people like Van Morrison. People like, did you go to the concerts or did you hang out with her and say, "Hey, here's Van," or here's
Well, a lot of that stuff happened, either before I was born or in that early stage, sort of
Okay.
from zero to five when we were living still in the UK.
Right.
So I was around for a little bit, but not much of my like cognizant memory.
Yeah.
Um, but I was always in the studio and at gigs with mum and dad, like regardless of who it was.
Uh,
I was always tagging along and helping out from a young age and
yeah.
just absorbing and taking it all in.
So you're sitting in the studio with maybe some iconic, and you're sitting there. Was that imprinted on you that that's something you want to do then? I mean, because making records can be very boring for people that aren't involved. So, as you know, as you're laughing. But was that something you said, "Oh man, I like this. We start out with nothing and we build up and put all the tracks on there and look, I hear my voice on there." Did it make a difference in what you wanted to do?
You know, I guess because it was just an environment, both the stage and the studio, that I was sort of just surrounded by from a
Hmm.
young age. It was just normal life to me. And actually, both my parents had really pushed me at school and really tried to. I had a really solid like classical music education because, they were really encouraging me to do something else just because they know how difficult it is to
Yes, it
live the life
is.
of a musician.
Yes.
And, what a sort of crapshoot it is to have a successful career, a sustained career. So they did their very best to steer me in another direction, but it really didn't work out. And they're thrilled for me now, obviously,
Oh, sure.
but yeah, it wasn't really so much a conscious, oh wow, that's something I'd like to do. It was just something
Hmm.
that I saw people do around me, and then I started doing. That's kind of just how it played out.
Right. And of course, I think the thing about it too for me is the fact that people that are trained classically, and you said you played piano, have a little bit
And
maybe, and violin. Well, there you go. Have a better understanding of how music is put together, so to speak,
sure.
and because you get the education on it, and so it imprints, I think, on the way you write and do things like that because you understand it. I have a friend of mine that's a composer, but he's a country swing composer. He writes
Hmm.
country swing music. But then
Sure.
he's been the director for a big city philharmonic, and writes. And I said, what did you do? Well, I have a huge university up the street from me, not too far, that where a lot of musicians go to.
Hmm.
And it's like me. I can write a song. I know how the song works, but there's something about people like you and people like him that just have that little bit more stuff that you can understand it a little bit more. And maybe
Yeah, look,
you know what I mean?
I do. And I think having that foundation can be super helpful and really interesting. That's absolutely not necessary to be a good songwriter to have that
No,
stuff.
no,
I mean, it's in some ways, I think it informs a different part of your brain.
right?
Um, that's it's not always necessarily the creative part of your brain. It's more the sort of logical part of your brain that can understand the systems of music.
Hmm.
So you sort of have this base where you can know with confidence what works with what the rules are as such. Um,
Yeah,
and that can be a positive and a negative because, um, you can get caught in that, I think, very easily and not want to break the rules. And in doing that, you kind of miss out on maybe some really creative, exciting things. And often mistakes, or, breaking the rules are the most sort of groundbreaking parts of music. So for me, having that foundation has been really meaningful. It's enabled me to do a lot of work that maybe other singers don't get to do. I'm really involved in arranging. It obviously really helps me with my own music and writing and finding options for myself.
Right.
But what's been important to me is understanding that that's a great foundation, but also being able to let that go in the right moments and not be afraid to sort of, break out of those rules, as I was saying.
I had a friend of mine, I haven't seen him for a while, but he was a phenomenal trumpet player. And he would play, I live in the Dallas area, so when the touring people would come in, they always, he'd play with some of the big players. And I asked him one time, I said, I can read music, but it's really a pain for me to do it, and then I have to think about it. And I said, what's the difference between you that they give you a chart and you read it and you start playing, sight reading, and me that says, oh, we're going to do a blues riff in A. And he said, well, the difference is, and I think part of what you're just saying, if you and I tell us we're going to do a 1-4-5 song in A, we know what that is and we can jam. If I'm sitting in front of a symphony orchestra and tell them that, they go, where's the chart?
Yeah.
And so that's the point that you're trying to make. So it's like they can't go into the phenomenal players, but they can't go and go, here, get the creative side and let it go.
Yeah, most classical players are not experienced in or comfortable improvising. Not all. I'm not going to say all because some people really are, but most of them are very much used to, as you're saying, having the script on the page for them. Where I feel really lucky is that I really have a good grasp into both worlds of that. Like I can read really well. I hardly ever need to, but if I had to, I could. And that enables me to communicate really well with horn players or, other band members. I've done a little bit of work doing orchestral arranging, and so I'm comfortable in that arena.
Yeah.
However, I can also know what a blues in A is and go for it without thinking about it. So it's really nice just to have those both worlds sort of working in tandem,
Yeah, I understand completely because I'm a business guy, but I also understand I'm a creative guy. So it's the same thing. If you put a contract in front of me, I can read it and tell everybody what it is. But then you say, hey, let's go write a song. I can do that too. So it's the same kind of thing.
Exactly.
When did you start? When did the big break came for you? I mean, you've performed with some iconic people. I was reading your bio and reading about it. And
sure.
I like asking people of your ilk, and if Joe was on here, I'd ask him the same thing. I asked a lot of them. When was that moment you said, and I'll tell you this, last year, excuse me, I interviewed Bogey Bowles, who was Joe's drummer for quite some time before you came on. He did the Royal Albert Hall gig that everybody watches millions of times. And I said to him, when was the moment you realized, wow, I'm sitting up here doing something? And he told me, and I said, so when was that moment you're like singing back up or you doing something and you're going like, I can't believe I'm standing here singing for fill in the blank?
Yeah. That's a hard thing to pinpoint to one moment, but I just thought of something that popped up. And when I was probably 19 years old. And I'd been singing a couple of years by that point. I started singing like in my last year of high school. I was really shy before that, and I could sing already, but I didn't like performing. I didn't like being on stage. Anyway, when I was 19, I got the call to sing with a really renowned singer in Australia. Her name was Renee Geyer, and she was sort of like an iconic soul singer in Australia, and we don't have many. So I had idolized her. And she called me and I knew her voice immediately on the phone. And God, at that tape, she actually dropped tapes off to me, cassette tapes, desk tapes to learn the gig. And she said, the gig is in 2 days. And I was like, okay. I mean, I knew her material already, so it was not a big deal. But a couple of weeks after the first gig with her, we opened for Ray Charles. And And
Oh
I
my.
got to meet him, and he was, and still is one of my idols.
Sure.
And I was maybe 19, maybe 20,
Hmm.
but I remember that was a real, you know, gravitas moment for me of,
Sure.
okay, I'm doing something here, and I'll never forget that.
So how did she find you though?
Well, I went to a music high school, and because of my parents, I knew a lot of musicians around Sydney already.
Hmm.
And, mum and dad were out there working. I'd met a lot of people through my school, and I got picked up in a band straight out of school with the father of one of my schoolmates. And he was sort of an iconic funk soul um, personality in Sydney, in Australia.
Hmm.
And it was through him that I discovered soul music, basically. I didn't know anything about soul music until I joined that band. And his name was Jackie Ozarski. He's escaped Hungary in World War II
Oh
and moved
wow.
to Australia. And yeah, he was really well known when I was coming up. Anyway, I learned so much in that band. He was a masterful arranger, introduced me to all the music from New Orleans that I'd never heard before, 60s and 70s funk, all the JB stuff. Like, it was a real education.
Hmm.
So it was quite a fast sort of trajectory for me, being from not doing anything to being a working singer. And because I had that foundation of being able to understand music at a sort of rudimentary level, I could learn things really quickly. I could be put into a section and, sing the inner parts of the harmony and not have a problem with that because I
Hmm.
just understood it in a different way,
Yeah.
which a lot of singers don't have that.
No,
And so
they
it
don't.
gave me a bit of an advantage when I was young,
Right.
and I got a reputation. So,
That would be
you
a
know,
good reputation.
mostly good. A mostly good reputation. I worked hard, and I'm pretty easy to be around, which I think is a big part of being employable. And that's where it all kicked off. So Renee Gayer was the singer I mentioned before. That was a bit of a break for me, and then it was about a year or two after that I actually got signed, and I made a couple of pop records in my early 20s, which charted pretty well in Australia, and I was sort of like famous, if you want to call it that,
Right.
for a couple of years on TV a lot.
Oh
And
wow.
yes, so I had that little season in my early to mid 20s of really going into the pop world and yeah, living in that space for a while.
So you've been exposed to this business for quite some time.
Yes,
You've touched it all.
I've been all the corners.
You've been to all the places that you can
Yeah.
visit. Were there times, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you were shy when you were younger. And I always wonder about people that play, whether they play guitar next to a famous guitar or a singer in the background. I'm always thinking, aren't they want to go, "Ah, I got to do this on my own. I don't want to keep being a hired gun. I want to be the person that's making the money that person's making." Is that, but were you wanting to do that? Because, I mean, you said at the beginning, you said you were shy. And obviously that changes over time because obviously everywhere you go now, it's sold out. Basically, you have a crowd.
Sure.
But did that affect you that you said, oh man, I want to start making, and then you had some fame, you said, doing
Hmm.
well. Did you want to just say, I'm going to do my own thing and try to do this all the time, just do my own thing?
Well, I did that, and I did try to do that. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is what that looks like. And there were a lot of things about celebrity um, that I didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
And just the nature of the focus point when you and look, this is specific to what I was doing at the time, was very much in the straight up pop world,
Right.
where maybe the quality or the nature of the music was sort of secondary to the imaging. And I was young and very attractive at the time, and marketed very hard in that space. And I sort of went from, it was a little bit of an ugly duckling kind of story, because I went from this really shy, I'm very nerdy, that's sort of my true persona. I went from that, I kind of just like blossomed into this like young beauty, and that was really sort of, I'm not going to say exploited, but It was pushed, and
Absolutely. Yeah, I
and
understand. Yeah.
it was an asset at the time. And I'm like, I have no, like, I'm not speaking from regret, but there was a lot about being in that particular space that I just found really vacuous and kind of gross, and it just was not a healthy mental space for me. And also, after two records, my popularity or the choices that were there for me started to decline, and you know, what became obvious was my music was secondary. It didn't really matter
I
what
see.
music I was making. And
Interesting.
I'm a musician.
Yeah.
Like and that look, there are things about the Australian music industry that have limitations. It's not there isn't the sort of appreciation of music in Australia that there is here in the US or in Europe. It just doesn't hold the same
Mm.
value.
Hmm.
And so that also made it difficult. Now, fast forward now, we're 20 years on now from what I'm talking about then.
Right.
And, I am sort of walking this tightrope now of being full-time employed with Joe Bonamassa, a wonderful gig that keeps me occupied up to 100 shows a year
Yeah, I know.
or more.
Yeah.
Which if I was only doing that, that's still a very busy life. But I'm also making my own records as an independent on the side. And so my balance now is probably like a 70-30. 70% of my energy is on the road with Joe. And then in the remaining time, I put all my energy into my own music. And I'm going to say it's a full slate. It's a
But you know,
lot.
I think what I was going to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Go
I
ahead.
think what you do is where you are is you get exposed to some great people that hang around with Joe.
Yeah.
So, in other words, you get to see the best producers, you get to see the great players and all that stuff. And I would think to a certain degree as you're writing your own music, which is very good, by the way.
Thank you.
And there's nothing wrong. This is the thing about music, family, so to speak,
Hmm.
is if they know you and you say, "Hey, I'm working on a new album or a new tune. I really need whatever, fill in the blank." Oh, I can do that for you and so I think it kind of not to, and then you might have the other opposite effect. Okay, I know all these people here, but I want my own people. So it's kind of a
Yeah,
mix.
I mean, I don't think there's a separation there. There's not a this school and that school in my
Yeah,
mind. It's
right.
all part of the same sphere. And obviously I've been with Joe for a long time now, and through him, my sphere has grown, and vice versa. I've brought some people into his world,
That's cool.
um, and it's beautiful because you do become like family with the people, especially people that you're touring with.
Oh yeah.
But I also, I don't know if you're aware of this, I also sing on every record that Joe produces. So there's a whole host of artists out there who I've sung on all their albums. I do all the
Oh,
backgrounds for his
so when I
production.
talked about Joanne Shaw Taylor and all these people that
Yep.
he works with, Cold Stairs and all those people,
Yeah.
you know them all.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
some of them, not all of them, but obviously they're on his label. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't think I'm on the cold stairs, but pretty much like Robert
No, they're
John,
just they're a three-piece band. They're not going
you
to be there, but
know,
I mean, I can see you on Jim.
Joanne, Larry
Yeah,
McRae,
yeah.
Eric Gales. There's a whole list of them out there. And we all work together. And Joe does a really amazing job actually of creating community like that and supporting community. And that was really evident through COVID as well. He initiated a lot of things just to
Yeah.
support people because we were all not working. But particularly people who were sort of at that grassroots level, he did a lot of things just to sort of help people out, which was beautiful to see. But yeah, like you said, we pop in and out of each other's projects. And Kirk Fletcher is a dear friend of mine, and he played most of the guitars on my new record. And I sang all the backgrounds and helped produce his vocals on his last record. And that's just what we do. We love working together. So it's that part of it is a blessing.
This is the one thing I learned from talking to so many great artists. Growing up, I always felt in a band, I've been playing guitar for decades, that you're always kind of in competition with somebody else. And then I realized I asked this to Joanne. I said, she mentioned she knew Samantha Fish.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so, do you ever feel like competitors and with Samantha? And she says, only when she's in town the same time I'm in town.
Well, of course,
And
like
yeah,
if
yeah.
you're up against each other for billing, that's you can't help that.
So
But
that kind of left the part where it's like, okay. And the other thing I've been fortunate to, I recorded Muscle shows once and got to
mhm,
meet a lot of people. And being around a lot of artists, you realize that if most of the people, and I imagine the people there's not egos involved so much. It's just like, hey, you play this way, I play this way, I sing this way, you sing that way, and it's not one is better than other. You might be able to do something different I can't. That's the one thing I learned from being around a lot of musicians like that. It's not a competition. As a guitarist, I never quit learning. It's
absolutely.
always it's like as a songwriter, you never quit learning because you hear something go, I should, that chord change right there. I
Mhm.
never thought about it. So let's talk about your album real quick. Not real quick, but let's talk about it. This is how many albums have you brought out now?
This is my fourth full-length Jade album. I've had some other projects, but this is my fourth full-length Jade album.
Okay. When did you start working on it?
I started working on this one in 2020 during COVID, and it really started as, I guess it must have been like July or August of that year.
Yeah.
And, the realities of, wow, okay, this is not going to be over in 2 months.
Mm-mm.
This is going to drag out. And, we were facing an extended period of not live work. And it was pretty depressing. And I had a couple of friends in Australia start reaching out and just saying, hey, why don't we try some long distance writing because it's something that we can still do.
We're not doing anything
And
else.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I wasn't super into doing collaborative writing on Zoom just because of
Mm,
it's kind of laggy and
yeah,
I don't know. I didn't love that part, but
I understand.
I'd have my friends, like a couple of them would just send me a chord progression, or, something they'd recorded, a basic little, yeah, progression or something. And that's where it all started. So
Mm,
it really, at the time, I wasn't necessarily thinking, oh, this is my next album. It was just something to do to kind of keep our spirits up and remind us of our identities as musicians. And so that's sort of where it started off. And I mean, when you listen to the record, I think you can really hear the times in
mm.
the lyrics because there was so much going on, obviously, with COVID and I mean, other things too. All the writing was done in 2020 and 2021. So that was kind of a, universally pretty challenging time for everyone.
Yeah.
And I know for me, writing songs, it's sort of like free therapy. It's
It
my
is
way of,
true, isn't it? It is like
you
therapy.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. It's just a way of processing what you're going through or
Yeah.
what you've been through maybe in the past. So yeah, that's all the songs. I think the album kind of has a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde personality because some of the songs get pretty dark. But then I've always been a very, staunch optimist. And you can really hear me kind of really trying to hang on to that, in some of the songs too, and use my music to try to retain that positivity. So I think both sides of the coin are there, and it's a pretty accurate depiction of how I was feeling through that whole period.
Well, and the thing about it though is here you are an artist, and it's like, most people, of course, nobody sells records anymore. So, as you know, the good old days are gone. Um,
Yep.
but the thing about it is you've got a situation where, everybody usually writes an album and they go out and support it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're on tour so much, it's kind of like you have to, if you put a band together, and I don't know, how do you support your music then? How do you get, it's nice that Joe goes, hey, she's got a new album out, but how do you get it out to the public?
Yeah, I mean it's on a pretty part-time basis right now. And obviously like really so my last album I put out in 2020 and then so I wasn't able to tour that album at all. I did a little bit of touring in 21 and 22 in Europe. I toured that album in 2021 and 2022. But yeah, I just do what I can. You know, I take my gaps. I still play live in Australia. My band on my record is my Australian band, phenomenal musicians. So every time I go home to see family, I do a little run there. And what's really nice, and kind of a strange phenomenon is now that I don't live there, my shows always sell out. And
Well,
it's like it was never like that when I lived there.
no,
But
no, no. That reinforces
I'm not hating on
the
it.
same rule. The rule has always been the same. You're never a prophet in your own land. You
Yeah, it's
know,
like all of a sudden I'm kind of exotic, which I'm totally cool with that. Let's
I bet
keep
you
it
are.
that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
But yeah, so when I'm off the road with Joe, I try to maximize those gaps either by if I'm in the studio, I'm in the studio, or right now, I'm sort of in a promotional phase, looking for some touring opportunities next year. I just announced today, I will be part of the Keeping the Blues Alive Alaska cruise next year.
Oh, they do. Are they doing Alaska?
Yeah, so that's just come out today, and I have never been to Alaska. It's one of the few states in the US that I haven't been to. So I'm actually really, really excited for that trip. It's going to be beautiful. But that's what makes it a unique experience for the fans is they get to have this sort of up close and personal exchange with a lot of the artists. And, for the most part, actually the artists are pretty willing to just, hang and there's always a certain contingency of people in the late night casino kind of vibe.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's a really fun scene. At the first time I went on the cruise was in 2017, and I was really apprehensive. I'd never been on a cruise, full stop, and I didn't really want to do it. I had all these kind of preconceived ideas about what it was going to be like out there, and I stand by that. If the music element wasn't there, I don't think cruising is for me. But because it's basically like a music festival on a ship. Like,
I'm sure it
it's
is.
morning till early morning, constant music and great sort of camaraderie, and it's a really good time. I was really blown away the first time, and I've never had a bad experience out there. It's awesome.
I just enjoy when I hear people like you sing. It really sings. It's just kind of like, ooh. It's like, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's listening to the Rayettes when I grew up.
Well, they set the bar. That's the blueprint right there. But also there's something magical about singing in harmony. Like is. Like it does something on like a cellular level to
Yes, it does.
So there's not, a great lead singer is one thing, but to be able to sing in harmony with others, like that's something that I've done. I didn't sing by myself when I was young, but I sang a lot in choirs when I was really young. And, so I've always had that experience of like, not to sound too hippie-ish, but like vibrating on that level with other human beings from a very young age. And that's something that is sort of essential to my life now. It's very important to me. And, I feel very lucky that I can it's a big part of my career is being able to do that with others. And I'm blessed to work with some of the best singers in the world. So it's a magic thing, like I get goosebumps even just thinking about it.
Well, that's it for this episode of The Trout Show. Thank you so much for stopping by. A very, very special thank you to Jade MacRae for coming on and talking about her wonderful career as a artist and a backup singer with Joe Bonamassa. For more information about her, you can go to our website, jademacraemusic.com, and it's spelled MacRae, JADEMACRAE.com. Thanks, Jade. And also, once again, our supporter, David Smith, thank you for your support as always. And for those people who want to know more about The Trout Show, you can always visit our website at thetroutshow.com, where it tells you all about everything that's going on. Podcast, YouTube, music, everything. So until the next time, people, remember, it's only rock and roll. But I love it. See ya.